It began with a direction that felt subtle, quiet, but unmistakably wrong. A thin ribbon of dust was bending in a way no comet should ever bend. Astronomers noticed it first. The tail of 3, I-Atlas, curling toward the sun, almost as if the star itself was pulling it closer. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't overexposure. It was a silent contradiction floating in the cold vacuum. A message written in the shape of light that refused to follow the rules of our solar system. For a moment, even the experts hesitated. Because every textbook agrees on one thing: solar wind pushes dust away from the sun. Always. But 3. I-Atlas turned the opposite way. Folding back like a hand reaching into a current it should not be able to resist. No model predicted it. No simulation explained it. And very quickly, the silence began. Updates slowed. Statements softened. And the anomaly was pushed quietly into the edges of official reports. They called it a perspective illusion. But the math disagreed. The angles disagreed. Nothing agreed. A tail turning toward the sun should not exist. Not here. Not now. Not under the physics we understand. And the part no one wanted to say out loud was simple. It did not happen just once. It happened again. So if you are ready, let's follow this anomaly to the place where the silence becomes louder. What happened next was something every comet expert wishes they could unsee. Because it broke a rule that is supposed to be unbreakable. A comet tail is always shaped by 2 forces. The gas tail is pushed back by the solar wind, and the dust tail is shaped by sunlight. Both forces drive material away from the sun, without exception. Yet, an anti-tail appears only under extremely rare conditions. You would need an unusual dust structure, a nearly perfect viewing angle, and a slight distortion in the surrounding gas flow. Even if all 3 conditions align, they can only create a mild visual illusion. But what 3 I-Atlas displayed was far more dramatic than an illusion. Its curve was sharp, confident, almost intentional. That is why the models began to fail. They could not recreate the angle. They could not reproduce the bending. And they could not explain the motion. And when the math refused to cooperate, scientists shifted their attention to something else. Something hidden inside the light itself. When Hubble and the James Webb Telescope turned their mirrors toward Atlas, the first thing they noticed was a strange concentration of light inside the coma. The front of the object was glowing more intensely than the region behind it. Something that should be impossible if the tail were truly being pushed away by the sun. That uneven brightness suggested that a secondary stream of gas was at work, a hidden force unrelated to the solar wind, pushing the dust in the opposite direction. A few specialists proposed that this might come from an uneven core, a pocket releasing a side jet that could bend the dust forward. But even that explanation felt incomplete. And it raised an uncomfortable question. If this was just a natural jet, why was there no trace of water vapor at all? Only carbon dioxide. The chemical data made the mystery even deeper. The spectral readings showed that carbon dioxide was 8 times more abundant than water. A ratio almost unheard of among comets that form inside our solar system. When carbon dioxide escapes into space, it creates a powerful secondary thrust that could, in theory, produce a push strong enough to bend a tail. But this ratio was far too extreme. the signature of a birthplace colder and more distant than anything near our sun. A star system where water freezes long before carbon dioxide does. That alone made the idea of a natural anti-tail far less convincing. And then came the biggest problem of all. The direction of the anti-tail did not match the direction of the carbon dioxide jets. Not even close. The anti-tail pushed the scientific community into a split that no one wanted to acknowledge openly. One group insisted it was nothing more than a geometric illusion, created by the angle between Earth, the comet, and the Sun. According to them, the tail only appeared to bend forward because of how the dust lined up in three-dimensional space. The second group disagreed completely. They argued that the anti-tail represented a real physical force, a genuine push that came from a side jet or a deeper structure inside the core. The debate grew sharper as more images arrived, because Atlas kept changing the direction of its tail over time. Something an illusion could never do. Quietly, behind closed doors. A few specialists whispered an idea that made everyone uneasy. They asked whether this was a form of controlled outgassing, a natural kind of propulsion, or perhaps something that did not fit the word natural at all. And just as the debate reached its peak, a new piece of data from Chile added fuel to the fire. The readings from the Very Large Telescope revealed a detail so small it was almost overlooked. Yet so strange, it changed the entire conversation. Inside the coma of Atlas, the instruments detected pure nickel. There was no trace of iron beside it. Even though the two metals are almost always born together in nature, for nickel to appear alone, it would require intense heat or a separation process that does not happen spontaneously. That was when a small circle of researchers asked a question they had been avoiding from the start. If the tail was being guided by something, what exactly was doing the guiding? And instead of answering that question, NASA quietly reduced the frequency of the tail updates, leaving the anomaly hanging in silence once again. The silence that followed was impossible to ignore. As the nickel findings circulated quietly through research channels, the public data stream began to thin out. The updates on Atlas slowed, then paused, then returned in shorter and more carefully worded summaries. Nothing dramatic was said. But the shift in tone was obvious. Images that once included tail vectors now arrived without them. Tracking logs that had been updated daily began skipping days. Every official statement repeated the same message that there was nothing unusual. Yet every missing detail suggested the opposite. Scientists outside the agencies started comparing notes and noticed the gaps lining up in the same places, right where the tail anomalies should have appeared. And with every quiet emission, the silence surrounding Atlas grew heavier, almost as if the mystery was being acknowledged without being spoken aloud. In the end, the most revealing information did not come from major observatories, but from amateur astronomers, the kind who watch the sky every night without expecting credit. They noticed that the direction of the tail shifted in patterns that did not match the orbital changes or the solar wind. On some nights, the tail seemed to twitch slightly, as if reacting to a tiny burst of force. On others, it held a geometry that no model could reproduce. If this were just dust and gas, the behavior should have been smooth and predictable. Instead, it was irregular and purposeful, almost like a response. That left only two possibilities. Either Atlas was shaped by a kind of natural physics we have never seen before, or it carried something within it that was not simply drifting through space. And so we arrive at the question that no one can avoid. What happens next, when silence is no longer an absence but a signal waiting to be understood? If you want to follow this anomaly to its final chapter, stay curious and stay critical.